What's going on, guys? We all know how popular black background photos are in horse photography. So in today's video, I'm going to teach you how you can take better black background photos. That's kind of a tongue twister. Better black background photos. Better black background photos. Better black background photos. And I'm going to teach you how I edit them. So let's get started. Little side note, there is no right or wrong way to do this. It's all personal preference. That being said, if you have any tips or tricks of your own, share them down below with us. Let's start talking about the setup. With this technique, you can turn just about any photo into a black background portrait. You just have to keep one important thing in mind: the lighting. Now, you want to avoid having harsh shadows on your subject at all costs, and the easiest way to do this is by placing your horse in a barn aisle, a lean-to, indoor arena opening, or at the very least, shade. Just be sure to make the lighting consistent and even across the horse. As you can see here in this photo, Costa is well lit, very even, no harsh shadows. Here's an example of harsh light. This is taken in the middle of the day, and you can see these unsightly shadows all across the horse. Here's another example of harsh light. Obviously, this horse is not in the shade. The sun is shining directly on him from the left, and it's creating that harsh line right there. It is possible to take a photo like this and turn it into a black background portrait. However, it's way easier if you do it in an opening of the barn or place them under something, just because it looks more natural. Here's another example of soft light. This would be ideally what we're aiming for when I take a photo outside for a black background portrait. The lighting is even across the horse and there's no harsh shadows. If you're using the opening of a building, position your horse completely in the shade, facing the light. Avoid getting the sunlight on your horse, as it can create those harsh shadows. If you look down below, you can see that I have Costa completely inside the building. Therefore, the light isn't touching him, and it makes for a very well lit photo. Although any opening will do, the more attention you pay to your background, the easier it'll be to edit your photo. What I mean by that is, as you can see, there's some lights that interact with his head. There's also the barn opening back there. I don't have it completely dark, as opposed to a photo like this where the subject is mostly in the dark area. And this one where, although they're both in the arena, this sweatshirt is interacting, because it makes it a little bit harder to edit. This photo is a lot easier to edit because, as you can see, the brightest part of the background doesn't intersect with the horse. You really want to make sure that the subject is completely in the dark, but that's not a make or break it. It just makes it easier for editing. Let's talk about what settings I use. There is no one setting for taking black backgrounds. However, a common setting I start with is around f2.8, 1/250th of a second, and my ISO around 200. I use f2.8 as my aperture because it provides a shallow depth of field, separating the horse in the background, making it easier for me to edit, and allows the subject to stand out against the background, making them pop a little more. The higher the aperture number, the more in focus the background will be, and the more in focus the back part of the horse will be. A little tip, I usually stay around f2.8 to f4 for black background portraits, as it leaves the background blurry and is easier for me to edit. If you look at this example here, you can see how the subject stands out against the dark background. Let's move on to shutter speed. I use 1/250th of a second for a starting point for my shutter speed because Horses move, guys. We want the photo to be sharp, and animals are unpredictable, so I need a fast shutter speed to make sure I can catch the pose before the horse decides to move or change its position. Another little tip here is avoid having blurry photos by never allowing your shutter speed to go below 1/250th of a second for horses standing still. Alright, we're going to move on to ISO. And I try to keep my ISO around 200 to make my camera sensor slightly a little more sensitive towards the light. It's useful to do this in low light situations, such as shooting into a dark barn aisle so that the horse isn't lost in the darkness, and it creates a little bit more of separation from the background. It also allows me to increase my shutter speed if I need to. ISO or ISO is artificial light, and with it comes noise. The ISO in this image is 800, and if you're shooting indoors, you're going to need to have a higher ISO. But a little tip here is I usually only go to a max of 400 for my black background portraits. Now we're going to move on to how to edit your photos. So the first thing you need to do is edit the image to your liking. I call this part cleaning an image. This is my image that I've already cleaned, and what I mean by cleaned is this is the original. I removed things like the halter, the lead, any blemishes and imperfections that I don't want on the final image. I can get pretty particular about this, but it's a lot easier to do this beforehand and add the black background in after. Alright, so this isn't a tutorial on how to edit or touch up your horse portraits, but I will be making a video like that in the future, so be sure to subscribe. Once all your edits are done, be sure to create a copy of your original. I've already done that, and you can see the before and after of my edits. So what we're going to do next is create a black color fill layer. So I select black, since it'll be our black background, and I'm going to add a mask to the image. Now remember that white are the areas that show up, black are the areas that do not show up. So when the mask is black, we hide our image. When the mask is white, you can see everything in the image, including the background. So I'm going to have the black color selected with my brush tool, and I'm going to begin painting on the mask. As you can see, it's hiding that background. If I get a little bit on the subject or the horse, you can see how it affects the horse and kind of hides some of the image. To see what needs to be adjusted, go ahead and hit the backslash key on your keyboard. That's the button above the enter button. The areas in red are masked, but there are some areas I need to fix, such as around the ears. As you can see, the ear is tinted red, and I want to clean that up so it looks a little bit cleaner. This is a great way to check your mask and to make sure your image is clean. Make sure there's not a whole lot of red on the horse, because that means that you are erasing some of your image. If the red part goes on the image, that part will be erased, and the background that we chose that is black will be shown through. So once you clean this up a bit, you can exit out of this mode by hitting the backslash button again. So you can toggle that on and off at any time. Now you can see that the background is gone from the image, and it just has our black background instead. I'm just gonna clean these ears up a little bit more, but it looks pretty good. So that's the finished image, and this is my final image after I did a little more editing. As you can see, that took barely any time at all. So this is our next image. You can see why I chose it, because it's not an easy one to do. The bright gray sweatshirt makes for it to be pretty difficult to get that hair from the beard of the horse without losing a lot of it. So this was my finished image, and I've already cleaned the image here so you can see kind of what it looked like before and after. I went ahead and made a copy of my cleaned image. And now let's pop on over to the channels tab. Select the channel with the most contrast. Try each one, the red, the green, or the blue, and I think for me personally, it is going to be the red channel. So I'm going to duplicate it by selecting it and dragging it to the bottom to create a new layer. As so. Our main reason for doing this is to separate the horse from the background. That sweatshirt is in focus and it's bright, and it makes it difficult to separate the whiskers from the background. So in order to do this, press Ctrl L and bring up your levels panel. Drag the left slider that represents the darks of the image and the right slider, which represents the lights of the image, and bring them together where the background is mostly black and the subject is mostly white. You're gonna need to touch this up, and you can do so by using your brush. Go ahead and paint out the areas you don't want in the selection. It works similar to a mask. I'm gonna speed this part up a little bit. And I'm not paying too much attention to getting all the hairs. I really am just trying to blend it and separate it the best I can. And once I do that, I'm gonna bring up the levels panel again and adjust it one more time, dragging those lights over, adjusting the midtones, which is that middle, that middle bar right there, and you can see that it makes a difference. Just play around with it and focus a lot on the hairs. You can always paint the subject white if you're losing some of the details. Once I separated it, I'm just gonna check to see how the mask is looking, and you can tell that it's not selecting all the hair yet. So I'm gonna use the lasso tool and select all the hair, the fine hairs in the image, the forelock, the mane, the body, and the chin. And once I do that, I'm going to go back into levels and adjust the area again. You can really fine tune the edges and focus on certain parts by using the lasso tool. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to check the selection. And And that looks like something I'm pretty happy with. So I control click on the layer and you can see the selection. And I'm going to add a mask. Oops, I don't know why that's locked. So by clicking the mask button, it automatically adds that mask. And for whatever reason, my background layer disappeared. I'm just gonna re-add this really quick. It's because I stopped and restarted my recording when I accidentally hit something and messed it up. But you can see, that's what happens if we invert it, that the mask is on. And we're gonna do the same thing where we hit the backslash button and we can see where we need to clean and tidy up because that red is showing through. And that red is the black background. I'm gonna speed this process up a little bit. So look at the hair, pay attention. Oopsies, I keep doing that. But what we're gonna do is blend that in with a low opacity brush. Hardness is at 0. So very soft, medium opacity, and kind of blend those edges in. A little tip that I do for when I have a lot of trouble with the edges is create a new layer, use your brush, change the size to 3. Make sure you're using a tablet for this because you're gonna need your pen pressure. I'm going to recreate some of the hairs. With my brush at size 3 and opacity and flow selected, so long as I use my tablet, I'm able to pull color from the lights, the darks, and the midtones with the eyedropper tool. And I'm able to recreate those fine hairs that might have been lost when we added our background. I was able to preserve a lot of them through using the channels technique, but it's kind of nice to add them back in to make it look a little bit more natural. So that looks good. And there's our finished image. Pretty simple. All right, this is my image. I've already cleaned it. I'm gonna go ahead to go into channels. I already know which one provides the most contrast, which is blue, so I'm gonna duplicate that. I'm gonna move a little faster this time. Once I duplicate that, I pull up my levels. I start to mess with them. You can really see how much easier it is to do this process with a light colored horse. It provides a lot of contrast from the background. So those whiskers, those fine hairs are really popping, which makes for a much easier selection. After I do that, I select it, control click, go back to the layers, add a mask, and now I'm going to add my background in, color fill, drag it beneath because the background will be underneath our main image since we want that horse to be shown through. And again, white is what you can see, black hides, and that's the job it did just from using the channels. I barely have anything left to do. We're going to double check this mask, backslash key to bring up the red. You can see those areas shining through that we need to touch up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Make sure I select the brush tool and just kind of paint back, cover those areas. The red makes it really easy to see what parts need to be adjusted. All right, and there you go. Looks pretty good. And there's our finished image. So it looks pretty good to me. I, however, do a little more editing once I get to that point. I add my color grading. Now you can add your presets, do any other stylistic changes you might want. You can even do things like add textures to the background, overlays, whatever your mind really desires. Now that you have that mask set up, it's really easy to replace that black background with a white one, with a texture, or anything like that. I have one final tip for you, and that's when you're working with really dark bay horses or black horses. You just need to create as much contrast as possible. So feel free to use things like mirrors, silver reflectors, other types of reflectors that will bring out any of the detail in the dark animal that you can't normally see. That's what really separates it from the background. If you like seeing before and after photos, I have a bunch up on my Instagram, which I update daily. You can check my Instagram out at instagram.com/ChelseaLizPhoto. Alright guys, that does it for me. I hope you found today's tutorial helpful. And if you did, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. Now, don't forget to wash your hands and stay safe.